All right, we're going to go now. So welcome everyone. I'm Andrew Hines with AUTOSOL and the Senior Manager of Digital Operations. And today with some of my friends, we are going to discuss modernizing edge and data center collection and how people are using MQTT, edge computing, simply for Emerson IPCs, and then Kubernetes container management. So with that, again, I'm Andrew Hines, Senior Manager of Digital Operations for AUTOSOL. We do a product called eACM, which is a protocol converter, MQTT and or OPC, a output. And this is how you put the Lego blocks together. So with that, I'm going to have my friends introduce themselves. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, Bill Peszkowski, Senior Product Manager, Emerson Electric, responsible for our industrial compute platform and our embedded edge software platform. The product of focus that I work with Andrew on is one of our small embedded edge devices called the IPC 2010, which is a dual or quad core IPC embedded with an ARM processor. Thank you, guys.
Great. Kelly?
Kelly Patel, Senior Application Engineer with TMMI. I work with various different edge products in my current role and in past roles to ensure, modernization and data analysis and all of the pieces we're going to talk about today with various different companies. And to elaborate, primarily, I do support pre and post sales. So that's really my expertise, including Bill's product and Andrew's products that they're talking about today.
Okay, Justin?
Hi, Justin Barksdale. I'm a principal architect at Spectro Cloud. We are a Kubernetes management company. We've been focused in multi-cloud Kubernetes management for about 6 years. My focus has been largely at the edge and the edge at scale. So when we're talking about these deployments that Andrew's going to discuss, we're going to discuss today, really, how do you manage those at scale? How do you update them? How do you maintain them? How do you make sure you don't have snowflakes? That's really an area that we focus across the board in terms of verticals. So glad to be here.
Great. Thanks for that, guys. So we're going to start off with on a high-level view of a high-level architecture of what we've seen or what is out in the industry. Okay. So you have things in the oil and gas, specifically on midstream, but this applies to upstream as well, is that you have SCADA, okay? You have your historian. You have your FlowCal, which is your EFM collection, which is for your measurement, okay? What the industry has done is typically those are 15-minute polls. And now the industry is asking, we want to get to 1 second because they want to feed machine learning and AI things. And we can put a pin in that and see how the conversation goes. But how do you do that? Well, and to get as fat, you just don't turn your polling up over your field area network to talk faster. That's not going to happen. So how the industry is doing this is with an edge device, okay? And so where AUTOSOL fits is we are a protocol converter polling engine, which is on the edge, and we can spit out MQTT and or OPC UA into these systems, okay? And so companies are asking 1 second data. You just don't, and you don't want to single thread yourself and put a single box out there that is just going to do MQTT. You need to think about these other things. And from my field experience, when I had to go out into West Texas and North Dakota and other places, you just don't deploy one thing because 6 months later, you're going to deploy another thing and another thing. So don't little box yourself to death. So this is how AUTOSOL and Emerson and Spectro Cloud have put these Lego blocks together to allow you to deploy one box that will do multiple things. How do you deploy that on day 1 operations, and how do you manage it at scale at day 2 operations? Because that's extremely, extremely important. So with that, I'll ask Bill, in the industry, when you're talking to folks, what are they asking you to, what are their pain points? What are they asking you to do?
So it comes from a lot of different areas. The biggest things that we get from some of the more sensitive and more distributed systems are like the oil and gas industry. The biggest concerns they've got are being able to collect the data given a specific protocol, something that's a little bit different or disparate rather than just being a one size unique solution for every single install or wellhead that they've got, something that's a bit more flexible to be able to get data from different protocols, different controllers, to get that in, do store and forward operations at that edge level, some level of compute that they weren't able to do before, maybe collate data, and then get that into a different kind of visualization matrix, whether they're going to visualize it locally or visualize it remotely. So combination of data storage, data integrity management, and then of course remote data management all across that board, and having a solution that is more of a one size fits all, that has the tools necessary to go in many different environments and applications is a really big focus.
Okay, great. And Kelly, from I've worked with TMMI for years. What are the type of questions that you're seeing? And this can relate to manufacturing and oil and gas and such. But what are the questions that your customers are coming to you for?
Yeah, I think, we, as Andrew pointed out, I work with many different customers, whether they're oil and gas, water, or discrete manufacturing. We have a very healthy mix of all of that. I think the biggest struggles that we find, and it really relates to what Bill was saying, is kind of twofold. One is not creating an island of data that is then not usable. So, that store and forward potential, there is some advancement, I think, in that area in architecture, where people are now starting to think about not just store and forward, but actually doing something on the edge to feed back into their system, or to at least do some alertion. So I think that's a pretty exciting component right now that we're seeing, that we're recognizing, not creating just that piece of data sitting there and not doing anything with it. That's really exciting for our industry, because it means faster ability to really orchestrate in our various different applications, the ability to then have effect, right? So I think that's the biggest one, is that need for either store and forward, certainly, or having some capacity or ability to feed back, whether it's to individuals or to their equipment. The other piece that Bill also touched on, and it's always been the case, and being that I was in a support role and still am in a support role for years, just with various different companies now instead of just a single company, this really hits home for me, and that is the ability to be flexible. And as you stated, Andrew, to think about not just today, but tomorrow. So, when that other item does roll into your space, you're able to not only capture that data, but then do something with it and cause effect. So that flexibility really is critical, without having a unique box every time, but having that flexibility to adapt, and do something with the data.
Great. And I'll expand on that a little bit, but I wanted to get to Justin. Justin, you've deployed where, the Spectro Cloud solution is managing, deploying from that day one and that day two. So what are the types of things when you get engaged with your customer base? What are they asking you to do at scale, and how are they looking at that, and how are you solving that?
Yeah, I mean, when we initially started out, we were focused on cloud management, multi-cloud management. How do we do those kinds of things? And I think the industry started shifting a few years back and saying, how do we bring some of these more cloud native type models to the edge, particularly because of regulations, because of security concerns? How do they patch more quickly? How do they maintain them more efficiently? How do they make them where they're not snowflakes? And so we started building out a platform that basically said a couple of tenets in terms of what our customers were looking for. One, they wanted to have some ability to make the environments consistent. So if I've got 1,000, 10,000 locations, I want to make sure that every location is the same thing. Now, there may be parameters that change, some variables, IP information, stuff like that. But by and large, the operating system and the core components don't change. And that gives them a lower or smaller attack surface in terms of security. Secondly, they wanted us to understand, and we started seeing this more and more, is people who are installing these aren't technical by the means that we look at, meaning they can do some basic technical functionality, but they're in the field in the middle of nowhere with no connectivity to anybody. It needs to be simple. How do I make it where it's simple to install and simple to troubleshoot? And then third, we looked at it in terms of just the sheer scale. You're not talking about a few hundred servers in a single location. You're talking about thousands or 10,000s of devices all over the world, potentially. So how do we make sure that we can manage those at scale? And our customers were really driven by the idea that being able to patch, being able to provide updates for both their applications as well as the operating systems on demand was something that they were striving for, especially as they started looking at like government regulations and potential penalties that may come by those.
Okay. And I have one more question for you. So when we look at edge compute, and I'll explain it using one of my analogies, is that if this was a whole meal, edge compute is the plate. And this is what Bill and Kelly deal with on a daily basis. Kelly and I deal with a daily basis what goes onto that plate, the entree. Okay, do I have steak? Do I have my potatoes and such? And Spectro Cloud is the knife and fork for what that is. What are the types of things that they are asking you to deploy? Is everyone single threaded? Are they looking at this in the right way? Because edge compute should be, I want to do multiple things on one box compared to little boxing myself to death. So what are those on the high level? Is it just the entree, or are they talking cybersecurity? Are they talking about those other tools? How are they utilizing that?
Yeah, so similar to how you have your drawing here, we look at things in terms of what we call a profile, or think of it as like layers of your stack that you want to deploy. And one of the benefits that we bring to the table in terms of just scale management is not every device or every environment needs the same requirement. So you may have some sites that are very, very small that have very minimal compute because they have, 100 sensors or whatever, and you just want to collect information and forward it off. That may be one element. And as was pointed out earlier, you may want to have a bigger site that perhaps is doing a bit more pre-processing. Maybe it's doing some type of intelligence there. And so that's a bigger device, and it may have another layer that needs to do that type of application. And then, lastly, you may also have areas where your data center or your larger sites or in the cloud. And so we provide a consistent model to deploy across all of those, thinking more of that a customer can pick a t-shirt size based on the environment they want to deploy to, but it's consistent regardless of the environment type.
Okay. No, thank you for that. So I'm going to put this to, I know how to answer, but I'm going to put this to Kelly and Bill. What are the things, are they customers coming to you single threaded and say, I want to do MQTT? Do they say, I want to do these things because this is what my business related outcome would be? Or are they saying, I need help? Tell me what is available to me. So what are they? I'll pick on Kelly here and then I'll move down to Bill.
It's a good question, because I would say it's all of the above. And I think that's the struggles, right? We do deal with some that very directly, and I'll say, think they know what they want. And the reason I say that is there is always growth, right? Once you do have that means of, whether it's fast or slow, but that means of actually taking that data and feeding it towards some means of doing something with it, right? Mm-hmm. That's always going to lead to some growth, and inevitably, in my experience, has led to, coming back to the table, whether you think you have, exactly what you want, whether it's I'm going to do a store and forward, and I'm using MQTT very directly and very specifically. There's always that growth, whether it's because, it's intentional or it's accidental. There's always a need for that growth. And I think that's the really important piece to pay attention to, is that flexibility and allowance that you're giving yourself at that edge layer and perspective, whether you think you know what you want or not.
Okay. Bill, how would you answer that?
Yeah, Kelly made a lot of really good points as far as where the customers are at, and it really can be across the board, depending on where they're at from a digital maturity standpoint and where they're at from an IoT and edge maturity, how far along that maturity matrix they are as they're going about their journeys. Where some companies are at that stage where they're looking for a lot more help than others, a lot more advice, because they either haven't had their own team or haven't had products like this before, haven't really gone too far down that journey to establish a stable IoT and edge base. Whereas some others have their own teams and have been going about this journey for quite a while, and they're looking more for advising on more advanced topics like forms of intelligence and deep learning and various machine learning models as they're kind of growing that into those next stages. But no matter what stage they're at, the really consistent thing is the need for some level of flexibility in platform, as well as the ability to grow, room to grow. And it can be very easy for companies to accidentally pigeonhole themselves, especially if they're not working with too much of a team. Edge is very much a team sport, and it requires a lot of voices and individuals from across the spectrum for data collection and computation, intelligence, cybersecurity, and so much more. Working with a great group can really help move that along, rather than trying to go about it from an individual perspective, either as a company or as a small team inside of a company.
Okay. So here's a question for the group. When we're brought in, and I know how I would answer, do you think A, they're asking the right questions to have a good mindset, and B, are they bringing the right players into the room when they execute this on an enterprise level? And anyone can answer first.
I just, let me provide some context. I think from my view, I think a lot of it is they don't know what they don't know, because this is largely new, at least a new frontier in terms of how you do these things. That, management, the functionalities that we're adding, the capabilities, the requirements, all of those have changed, and we've seen so many different environments that have presented unique challenges for each customer. So I think a lot of it is, educating them when we come in. It's educating them on what we've seen to understand, do you have these use cases, and then potentially invoking conversation with them in terms of letting them know, hey, this is what the challenge with that is, so that they understand. Then how do they bring the right people in? Who are those people that need to come in and talk and have those conversations? So I think for me, it's more education, and then discovery to understand what exactly they are trying to do, because there are probably unseen or unknowns that we have no idea about.
Okay. Bill and Kelly?
Yeah, I guess I would add on and point out too, and the importance of what Bill said in terms of a variety of people in the room and not limiting yourself. And one item that we haven't pointed out is the fact that your personnel, whether it's a small group or a large, could certainly change in the future. And one of the interesting components that we're seeing right now in our industry is a shift and a movement with different abilities in our personnel. We have, a subset of personnel that have been in the industry for quite a while and for a long time, and have a level of comfort with a certain subset. They may be experts, right, in certain software or hardware components, right? And so they have that level of security and that experience. And then we have a new set of personnel coming into our industry, and it's a really exciting time because they bring a new subset and a new knowledge set. They also are very capable of learning, with an application, right, and growing that knowledge. So I think that's the other thing we really struggle with when you limit the group that is involved with this exploration of what we're doing with the edge components, is you really limit yourself on what you are able to do in the future, and understanding that it's going to shift, not only because that's our industry with what we deal with from equipment out there, but also because we have personnel that are shifting, always changing, and growing in terms of what they are comfortable with.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I like to liken a lot of those conversations or compare those to almost like having a conversation with a doctor or a physician, right? The information that our customers don't tell us can really cripple us from a advising standpoint. If we don't have all the information about a given scenario or situation, a given type of implementation. And if they're really approaching it from a pigeonholed perspective, sometimes they come forward with, maybe they're just looking for a specific hardware set or set of features, very limited thing, when it turns out that they may need something completely different. And we may want to advise on something completely different based on the solution they're looking for at the end of the day, or because they have a much more complicated problem than they may have thought they had. And being able to bring that expertise to the table can be really difficult unless we're able to have a very open and candid conversation with the customers. So some of that can be quite tricky, but it happens quite often. And our goal being able to fit the solution to the problem with some level of room to expand is really important. So making sure that we have all that information upfront and available will really help those conversations move forward and help us diagnose problems and move forward with our customers better.
Great. So I'll add what I see in the industry. So when engaging with folks, and I might start with automation, or I might start with SCADA, and when they're saying, "Hey, I want to improve this," whoever the owner of, "Hey, I want to get 1 second data," or I need 5 minutes on gases and I want 5 seconds on liquids, for example. What I say is typically SCADA is talking to a device. Okay, your FlowCal folks, they're talking to a device. They want once an hour. The Pi folks, or the historian folks, they want whatever they want at whatever resolution that they want. And one of the advantages of doing it this way when you deploy your edge program is get all those people in the room, because instead of them talking to an independent device, talking 4 or 5 things talking to one device, use MQTT, use AUTOSOL and such to talk to the device once, bring that data in, and then your SCADA, your measurement folks, your historian folks, and those other tools that you use can share in that same data. And that reduces the load. It reduces the load and the complexity of what you need to do with your field area networks, simplifies the things that you are doing, and your internal customer, whether that's SCADA or historian and such, they get a better product. And also too, I will go into, and I'll ask Bill and you guys this, is it goes into contextualization. Okay. If I'm going to go out and touch a device, okay, and I'm going to send a field tech out there, and I'm going to, instead of bringing it in the same old way, except I'm just bringing it at a faster rate, maybe use that ability to contextualize or, dive into a unified namespace, normalize that information so everyone is bringing it in the same fashion. So with that, do you guys have anything to add to that before I start with the poll question?
I like it, Andrew. Decluttering.
Right, yeah.
As a controls support person, I really believe in that. I think that's huge for multiple reasons. So
yeah, when I was in the medical space, everything was normalized, everything. And when I did some manufacturing stuff, it was all coming in the same fashion. When I came to oil and gas, it is depending on what year, who did it, what the product manufacturer was, and what was going on. And, since the industry has traded, fields and, companies like baseball cards, where it was a small company and they became a medium-sized company, and then a large company bought them, depending on what you were putting in and how you were naming it and what the philosophy was, you have this big melting pot. And so I look at edge computing, and would love your guys' thing on this, is that using that as that demarc. You might not want to change everything, all those PLCs. You're not going to rip and replace everything. But if you can use edge compute as that demarc, and then everything is coming out in a normalized and a contextualized manner from that particular point, that's a huge win. And that's what I think that the industry is starting to wrap their heads around, especially as we get into machine learning and AI things. And that's a different webinar for a different time. So before I start the next poll question, do you guys have anything to add to that? Or
I think it definitely is, in the industry, has been a shift from treating edge as these one-off devices to more of a platform and enabling those things to do more. We see use cases coming out of edge that probably none of us ever would have imagined. And it's not just oil and gas, but across the industry, across technology, we see more and more use cases that are just really out there. And so I think providing yourself a platform that you can do it onto, providing yourself with, as Andrew points out, Lego blocks to be able to build it, then the industry is just driving towards that more and more.
Great.
Yeah, and I would add, our industry, and this I don't believe is going to change just because of the monetary component there, but our industry is maintains, whether it's oil and gas, water and wastewater, or discrete manufacturing. If it's not broken, it's not going anywhere, right? And the idea is not only decluttering the hardware when you can and if you can, but the fact is we've got very old equipment out there that, although it's old, we still need data from it to be effective from an overall picture. And so I think being smart about using these devices and utilizing them to enable us, as you said, right, to be flexible and to bring everything into one layer securely from devices that maybe never could get up to that level, right, is a really important component without or with very little complexity and addition for support. And that's a big deal.
Bill?
Yeah, there's a growing demand for these devices to help declutter, as it's been well put by you guys so far. What's going on inside various different areas of the manufacturing space and industrial space, but even more so to do it in a way. This is kind of a more recent evolve within the last 10 years. Evolution is to do it in a way that's a bit more transparent too, because as we've mentioned and we've touched on, there's varying skill levels of people that are entering this force, both at the technician stage and the maintenance stage. And for many individuals that are getting into this that are a bit detached from the programming and code side of everything, a lot of edge devices, IoT, seems like a lot of magical boxes, things that do things, and there's not a lot of visibility to what's going on. It actually could make a system more difficult to maintain and diagnose issues. When you're normalizing data, bringing things in, and you're being very transparent about how that's done, you can see where data streams start to fracture as they go through this normalization stage, and that can be used by maintenance and technicians and other individuals or a little bit further behind on the technology spectrum there, to be able to know that there's something else going on, and it's not necessarily the edge or these IoT stages that are actually causing an issue with the data management in both the monitoring and the portions of the control system when the data streams are shared. So it offers a great opportunity for individuals to properly assess what's going on and where those issues are, because of how transparent edge solutions and IoT solutions can be, rather than being those historical black boxes that IoT was when it first started coming in.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so we're going to attempt to do a poll here. Hopefully I'm hitting the right button. I'm going to start the poll, and I'm going to get everyone 30 seconds to click some buttons here for our participants, or 60 seconds. And then based on your answers, then I can kind of guide the conversation. So if everyone who's on the webinar can vote, that would be great. All right. So the answer for this is kind of what I've expected and what the industry is and how I'm being brought in, and I would assume you guys are brought in as well, that it's partner supported. It's a collaborative approach. We have a little talent we have some talent internal, can't do it all, and we have some external talent that we want to bring in, like a trusted integrator or partner for what that is. So I find that that's pretty much in line with what I would expect. Let me ask this, okay? Now we've talked about we talked about the thing, okay? Why people are necessarily, how you would do it, what you need to look at when you put something out there, and then getting the data in, okay? And I'm going to talk about, okay, now that you have a bucket of data and you've deployed edge, are customer or end users asking you of what should I be looking at? What do they think is the lowest hanging fruit, or where do they want to take this? Now I have my impressions, but I want to ask, you guys, who I trust and are engaged in these conversations on a daily basis, what are they looking the end result to be? Are they just saying, I want to do edge because I think it's cool? Is it a maintenance type operation? Is it predictive type operation? Are they trying to improve some efficiencies, do more things? What are they asking you?
Good question, Andrew. I think, again, it's a variety, and it depends on who you're talking to and what their pain points are. It's interesting because in that poll question, the bucket of only a partner, doing their thing wasn't touched. And again, that's kind of what I would expect. You'd either want to get a group internal and work on that. But again, it's that point that we pointed out earlier where you don't know what you don't know, right? And having a partner can help you with that. To help to point out, and as Bill said, to point out those difficult points, or to have the difficult conversations amongst various different groups. But inevitably, edge comes up in the different personnel that you talk to for different reasons. It might come up because there's a pain point, because you're talking to primarily control layer personnel that is interested in uptime, which means that they're looking for alertion typically. They're looking for that ability to make their job easier with remoting in securely still, but having a greater level of where their equipment's at on a given daily basis. I think from a SCADA perspective and layer, there's a lot of interest in certainly the security aspect, but also centralizing and maybe making that a cleaner, easier visualization for perhaps management and reporting purposes, right? Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the personnel that you're talking to. But again, the really neat piece of what I typically, and I know the others in this conversation are involved with, is that aha moment where you're talking to them and inevitably something does come out that they were looking for and they didn't even realize it, right? And that's the exciting piece, because we've now gained a lot more.
Okay. Bill, Justin?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we hear from customers from the approach is actually usually centered around what the lowest hanging fruit is. And for customers, it does vary. The biggest ones are additional, either going to be additional revenue streams where customers are utilizing edge data and IoT in order to do more and get more from the data that they have. If they're an equipment manufacturer, somebody in the middle, being able to provide that value back to their end customers, or if they're a service provider, being able to optimize that service that they're providing and either avoid additional costs or be able to provide additional services based on the data that they're collecting. And those can be very, very low-hanging fruit where customers are able to move fairly quickly on those projects because they have a goal in mind. And usually there's a very clear success story there. Customers that are a few steps further away, that are a little bit more hesitant or for not quite as far along in their endeavors, are those that are doing more primarily cost avoidance, right? They're just going to start collecting data in the hopes that they can identify insights and whatnot on pieces of equipment themselves if they're an end customer, and implementing their own predictive analytics and maintenance schedules on equipment. And Customers that are usually a little bit further away than that are ones that have disparate systems, and their edge endeavors start at data collection, just rudimentary data collection, and integration of systems between each other. And they're using edge as a gateway, either between assets or between networks, as a communication tool and data sharing tool. So quite a bit of a different bandwidth there, depending upon where they're at. But we do see a lot of traction in many different regards, because there are so many different solutions that you can get out of an edge platform.
Okay, great. Justin, because you're exposed to a lot, what is the thing that your customers are trying to accomplish? Why are they coming to Spectro Cloud? Because they want to do like the greatest thing, or they have some vision in mind, or they need help with that vision.
I mean, I think the answer is always it varies, but mostly it's that they're trying to drive innovation to their customers or to their existing solutions. And innovation can mean a couple of things. It can mean new features. In some cases, that's true. In other cases, it could mean they need to provide, as I mentioned before, because of regulatory reasons, security patches more quickly. So they need to innovate and be able to deliver those outcomes more swiftly to avoid financial penalties. I think no matter what they start out as, it always evolves, and they see more is being done, especially as compute resources become bigger in capacity for a cheaper price, a lower power consumption. They start to see, oh, what if I could do this with that thing? What if I could do this? And we've seen customers before initially start out as an IoT collector, right? They're just going to collect telemetry information. They're going to do some pre-processing and punt it to the cloud to do additional analysis. And then they inevitably, some other group says, well, I really wish we had some compute out there so we could do this functionality. And somebody raises their hand and says, I thought we bought some piece of hardware and put it out there recently. Oh yeah, we did. And then now they want to use that. And I think, again, going back to the platform mentality, it's that ability to provide a solution that a customer can evolve with, and that doesn't require revamping when I want to add a new feature. I just want to add another Lego block to it to make it work with my existing solution, provide the same security, provide a lower cost. So everything that everyone else said, I think inevitably you just evolve up the stack. And typically the lowest hanging fruit for us is often that they want to provide that new feature, whether that feature is security enhancements for internal consumption or it's for their customers, is really up to the particular customer that we're dealing with.
Okay. I am going to bring up an example of data here. And here's a good one. And so this is where, the blue line here for everyone to see, this was a traditional 15-minute poll. The then implemented MQTT edge device and did a 1 second resolution. Okay, excuse me. This was the blue was a 2-minute poll, and then the black line is a Sparkplug-B 1 second poll. Okay, or great or better. So you can see here at a 2-minute poll, everything is normal on this compressor flow. Now, I'm not the expert in this, but you wouldn't see any challenges from a maintenance operation, or if it was exceeding tolerances, or if I needed to, I'm putting additional stress on that piece of gear. Because in my experience, and this is up, it can be up for debate, is that I think that the industry waits for something to fail and then goes and replaces it, and they take the time. So that can cost twice as much or spend twice as much downtime, but they just wait until that breaks and then I go fix it. I think with getting higher resolution data, you can see here where if I was paying attention to the blue line when I was polling, that is, it looks like everything was dandy. Okay. When the black line, it was actually for those seconds, it was actually doing this and could cause, fatigue on that line or, fatigue on that piece of equipment. And so I think, and again, I would love to hear from you guys. I think that the lowest hanging fruit right now, when we talk about, I want 1 second data, is from that predictive analytics. I can take this and then I can start to go tweak things, or maybe I can go do a scheduled maintenance operation compared to waiting for something to break, and that's unscheduled. Okay. I think the second thing that is going on in the industry is, I explain it as the Tesla full self-driving model. Okay. My my wife's Tesla is not a supercomputer, but it transmits everything that it sees on the road at MQTT via MQTT or an LTE connection up to the mothership with a million other cars. And every 7 to 10 days, it pushes a new optimized model down to that edge box. I think that is the second thing which is going on. Can I push more at a faster rate and start to tweak things faster compared to how I respond now? Because I think there's some underperformance. And if I can push more performance without spending more money on infrastructure and such, then that's the way I'm going to go. So I think it's kind of twofold. So those are some of the use cases that I'm being asked about. And those are some of the things where you can use MQTT. This is where an edge box comes in, but also, breaks into cybersecurity and what are those other tools that I'm trying to do. So with me saying that, what do you guys think? Is that kind of the things that they're asking to do, or completely different, or what are some of those other use cases?
Yeah, I think 1,000%, Andrew. I think also you're reminded me back in the day of having to do that manual data collection ourselves, right? And pawing through the data collection very manually, creating the reports, creating these captures, and taking it into meetings to try to be predictive in terms of how our equipment was running, right? And then we moved into a space in an area where we have these great historical collection tools that help us to create those reports. So, taking it way back, to my career and having to do that myself and getting that heads up with, I've got a tool that can kind of help me do this still, but I still have to take that into a meeting and make decisions and talk to some people, because there's multiple different, pieces of data that make this full picture for an application, right?
Mhm.
And so now what we're seeing is not just, that progression of manual operation to automatic, but like you were saying, that feedback, right? And again, very selfishly, being that I still do support, right? What this means, right, is that ability at the lower level for maintenance personnel and controls personnel and software personnel to have a alertion of something coming up, such that we have equipment in place, we have an ability to react far beyond before. What this means from a company-wide perspective, right, and from a feedback higher at the business layer, right, is the ability to have more uptime, perhaps energy savings, right? Maybe there's something that comes out of there where you realize, gosh, we don't need to be running and we shouldn't be running that equipment, right? And we learn that because we have this ability to quickly analyze, produce alertions, but then also feedback. And I think that's the piece that has been missing in our industry and is progressing now.
Okay. Bill and Justin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think based on the way that kind of things are progressing and whatnot, I think that there can be there needs to be, and customers are starting to realize this, some level of balance in between all of it. When we have some of this a demand for a previous demand for a slower polling method, we get situations like we see on the graph that you're showing here, where issues can be a bit muted, but then sometimes the tendency of kind of going the other way, where we have high fidelity data, because it can be in certain regards super erratic, things like pressures on the outside of a compressor. There needs to be that extra level of capability there. And I think some customers are realizing that SCADA is not the right tool for that, because it doesn't have that extra compute capability and capacity, where you have this high fidelity data at a high speed, being able to do data smoothing so that it becomes a little bit easier to understand and read, so you can see the trends, go a long way at the edge level, so that we're not transmitting such large amounts of data, or trying to transmit large amounts of data over the internet or up to the cloud. if that ends up being the case. And then we can use that high fidelity data to do comparisons over time. Maybe if there is a spike, where traditionally in the control paradigm, we would say, okay, if the pressure hits above this number, we know that there's an issue. It's a very one-dimensional way of addressing things, and customers are realizing that maybe that pressure point at that point in time is not actually as much of an issue as we would have thought. We're worried about, is that pressure during that peak trending over time, not just a given one-dimensional thing, but very much three-dimensional of the data point, the cycle that it's in, and the period of time. Over a period, is that trending upwards? And having that available analytic to be able to learn over a period of time is only really going to be available through Edge. So taking what we've done before, just looking at data on graphs, being able to try to diagnose a correlation with our eyes, really taking it to that next step where we're doing deeper analytics and actually learning. And that's only going to be achievable with the right software and with the right hardware platform to doing true Edge analytics.
Yep. Justin, before I move on, kind of finish this up here, I know that you've been involved in a lot of different use cases. So are your customers looking to you because they want to do the thing, because they want better data to make decisions, or they want to be able to react faster, or or is it a mixture? I mean, I understand it's a mixture of both, but I want to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Bill just said, it is the industry is evolving, and we look at Edge as being as close to the data as being meaningful, but not any closer. So I may not be on the pump, but I'm going to be at the station where the pump's feeding information. And that means that I can take more than one pump, and I can take aggregate information, and I can do intelligent things, whether that's manual today and evolves to be automated. I'm certain it will. And I think then it just expands from there to what other interesting things can we think about? And based on having more information, seeing more, you showed this graph about 1 second polling. When you have more data points and you're aggregating them together across different pieces of machinery, there's a correlation between maybe this spike, and maybe it's not that bad of a thing. Maybe the automation can realize, hey, I don't need to worry about it. Whereas a manual process might go, whoa, I need to shut this down because something's happening. So I think we're getting to a stage where that's becoming more and more prevalent in our industry. But it's also a retraining of personnel. It's also a new understanding of belief in the technology working. And I think it'll take some time, but we're definitely driving towards that. And as more information comes in, you are less likely to want to pump that to some cloud, because that typically costs money. So how do I process it locally? How do I do it there? Or at least in a place, as I said before, that is as close to the data to be as meaningful, but no closer.
Yeah. And I'll show that I've been showing this graph a lot here, but I'll just kind of articulate. What I think is going on in the industry is, okay, so maybe they did get 1 second data before, maybe they got a higher resolution. It was down here at this level, which it didn't, by the time I got it and did an analysis on it, it was too far gone for me to have an impact on my business operations for the most part. Okay. What I see in the industries with edge compute is that we're moving that data. So again, it's closer to the asset, but closer to the things that I can react in a faster manner to be able to do things. So those tools, I believe, instead of sitting way down here, they're starting to sit in parallel with your SCADA and your historian and with those other tools at this level, so I can react faster. And this is where it brings, instead of traditionally, we'll say, IT or some data analyst was doing something, it's now coming to OT can react faster and in a better manner with that higher speed. And I think it is starting with a maintenance operation, and then they can start to do more, and then it's going to start pushing what those models are down. So with that, I'm going to see if this portion works here for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions and they have the bar that's there, they can put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll finish this off and give you guys 10 minutes back your hour that we booked this for. So we'll see if there's any questions up on here.
While we're waiting for a question, Andrew, I would mention too, it's interesting that you were talking about that we're now getting closer to the equipment. Justin mentioned it as well. One of the things that we haven't pointed out that we quite often find with these explorations is sometimes we're creating issues, right? We're actually creating issues and unaware of that because we're hindering or hounding some of our equipment. Sometimes it's older equipment that can't handle, that push. And so, we talk about the filtering. Well, sometimes that edge can, be our filtering spot and our position to help with equipment that, again, maybe can't be hounded as quickly. We're cleaning up the network, certainly, right, from a communication standpoint, but it can also be, protective in terms of, equipment that really should be pulled at a particular frequency in combination with another piece of equipment from that learning perspective, but it shouldn't be hounded, right? Because there's no need for that, right? And so some of that ability to have effect to actually clean up our networking side potentially, but also cause an effect there.
Okay. Justin, Bill, any finishing thoughts before I take us out?
No, just thanks for having me.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
My final thought is really to just sum it up. I think the biggest piece here that we're really getting to that stage where, right, we don't want to just be polling data. We want to be taking data and creating insights, and the insights are what we want to be sharing throughout a network, because that's going to be a lot more efficient and a lot more beneficial to everybody that handles them, is handling insights rather than data. That seems like that's the next evolution of where we're going.
Yeah. I think that the industry right now with edge computing, because, edge computing has been near and dear to my heart for about the past 8 years now, I'm getting old, I think that it's at a tipping point. I think that customers are asking the right questions. They have the right mindset. Maybe this has to do with a different aging workforce where there's some younger ideas that are coming in, newer technologies. And I think that there's a convergence of all these technologies that people can truly take advantage of edge computing. They have a good mindset on how to deploy this at scale, because we've taken our licks, and then be able to get actionable data off what you're trying to do, compared to, hey, I want 1 second data, and then you just move on. So with that, I want to thank you guys. Did a great job. Thank you very much for participating in the webinar. And anyone who wants to learn more, you can always contact AUTOSOL, and I can get everyone together and we can discuss your particular use cases and everything. But everyone have a good day, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.